Two survivors, two stories, Little Bighorn's untold legacy. Gunfire erupted across the frozen valley of Wounded Knee, shattering the morning silence. Dewey Beard, already a veteran of Little Bighorn, raced through the chaos searching for his family. Blood stained the snow crimson as he fought his way through the crossfire, unaware that this day would mark yet another tragic chapter in his extraordinary life story. Welcome to Native Legends and History Stories, where we bring history's forgotten voices back to life. Subscribe now to join us on this powerful journey through America's past. The air crackled with tension as Custer's 7th Cavalry rode into the valley of the Little Bighorn. 31 officers, 586 enlisted men, 33 Native American scouts, and 20 civilians, each man a tiny thread in the vast tapestry of war. Little did they know that this day, June 25th, 1876, would be their last. The battle erupted with a fury unlike anything they had ever witnessed. Gunfire roared like 1,000 thunderstorms, the air thick with smoke and the stench of burnt powder. Horses screamed and fell, their riders crushed beneath them. Men cried out in agony as bullets tore through flesh and bone. The valley, once a place of serene beauty, was transformed into a scene of unspeakable carnage. When the guns finally fell silent, the silence was deafening. Over 260 of Custer's men lay scattered across the battlefield, their lives extinguished like candles in a storm. Custer himself, the legendary boy general, was among the fallen. The Lakota, Arapaho, and Cheyenne warriors had fought with a ferocity born of desperation, defending their land and their way of life. Their victory was decisive, but it came at a cost. Dozens of their own warriors lay dead or wounded, their sacrifices etched in the memory of their people. Amidst the devastation, stories of survival emerged, tales of courage and resilience that would be passed down through generations. One such story belonged to Frank Finkel, a sergeant in the 7th Cavalry. He claimed that his horse, spooked by the gunfire, had carried him away from the heart of the battle. Both man and beast were wounded, but they managed to escape the carnage. Days later, Finkel stumbled upon a settler's cabin, where he received the care he desperately needed. He would carry the physical and emotional scars of that day for the rest of his life. But Finkel's account is not without controversy. Some historians question his claims, suggesting that he embellished his role in the battle. Whether his story is entirely accurate or not, it serves as a stark reminder of the chaos and confusion that reigned on that fateful day. Today, we delve into the stories of two other survivors of the Little Bighorn, one a Native American warrior, the other a figure from the U.S. Cavalry. Their experiences, though vastly different, offer a unique perspective on the battle and its aftermath. One of these survivors was a hardened veteran, a man who had spent 8 years in the unforgiving ranks of the U.S. Army. He had faced danger before, had felt the sting of bullets and the fear that gripped a man's heart in the heat of battle. But nothing could have prepared him for the sheer brutality of the Little Bighorn. 7 times, enemy fire found its mark, tearing into his flesh. Yet, he refused to surrender. He fought with a desperate courage, driven by an instinct to survive that burned brighter than the pain. When the battle ended, he lay among the fallen, his body a testament to the ferocity of the fighting. But he clung to life, his spirit refusing to be extinguished. He was discovered, barely conscious, and transported to Fort Lincoln, a sanctuary of relative safety. There he endured months of agonizing recovery, his wounds slowly healing under the watchful eyes of the fort's medical staff. His resilience astonished those who witnessed it. He was a symbol of defiance, a living embodiment of the fighting spirit that had driven the 7th Cavalry. The Army, recognizing his extraordinary courage, issued a special order, ensuring that he would be treated with the utmost care and respect. Being the only living representative of the bloody tragedy of the Little Bighorn, the order read, "His kind treatment and comfort shall be a matter of special pride and solicitude on the part of every member of the 7th Cavalry, to the end that his life be preserved to the utmost limit." Wounded and scarred, he was a living reminder of the sacrifices made on that fateful day. His very existence spoke volumes about the horrors of the battle, the courage of the men who fought, and the enduring human spirit that could triumph even in the face of death. His ordeal didn't end on the battlefield. After months of agonizing recovery, he was finally declared fit for duty. But the Army, recognizing the profound impact of his experience, refused to let him return to the fray. He was a living symbol of the Little Bighorn, a testament to the sacrifices made that day. Instead, he embarked on a life of ease and honor. He toured various forts, a hero welcomed with open arms wherever he went. At Fort Riley, Kansas, he was even bestowed with the honorary title of Second Commanding Officer of the 7th Cavalry. While not an official rank, it was a gesture of deep respect and admiration. He participated in parades, his presence a reminder of the valor displayed by the cavalry. He shared stories and drank beer with his fellow soldiers, the camaraderie a balm for his wounded spirit. He was more than just a survivor. He was a cherished member of the 7th Cavalry family. Finally, in 1891, his long journey came to an end. He passed away at Fort Riley, the place where he had first been wounded in service to his country. He was laid to rest with full military honors, his passing mourned by those who knew him and those who knew his story. It's fitting, isn't it? We honor those who serve, those who put their lives on the line for their country. We remember their sacrifices, celebrate their courage, and ensure that their stories are never forgotten. But what about those who fight on the other side? Those who defend their homes, their families, their way of life? Do they not deserve recognition for their bravery, their resilience? Consider Dewey Beard, a young Lakota warrior who rode into battle against Custer's troops. He was just a teenager, barely more than a boy, but he fought with the heart of a lion. He loosed a single arrow, a deadly shot that found its mark. He counted coup on a fallen soldier, claiming his bugle and horse as trophies of war. Dewey's participation in the battle was brief, but its impact on his life was profound. He would carry the bugle with him for the rest of his days, a reminder of his role in that historic clash. The horse he captured carried him north, to the safety of Canada, where he joined Sitting Bull and other Lakota who sought refuge from the encroaching U.S. Army. Dewey Beard, a name he would adopt later in life, was a survivor. He had faced the might of the 7th Cavalry and emerged victorious. His story, like that of the unnamed cavalry soldier, is a testament to the human spirit's ability to endure even the most harrowing of trials. But unlike the soldier, Dewey's story is often overlooked, his contributions to history overshadowed by the narrative of the defeated. Dewey Beard's birth name, the name given to him by his Lakota family, has been lost to time. The earliest records we have identify him as Many Wounded Holes, a name he earned by 1880. This name, stark and evocative, speaks volumes about his early life as a warrior. It suggests a young man who faced danger head-on, who carried the physical reminders of numerous battles, and whose courage was evident in the scars he bore. Each wound was a testament to his bravery, a mark of his resilience in the face of conflict. By 1886, he was known as Whiskers, a simple nickname that likely reflected his changing appearance. Perhaps he had grown a beard or mustache, marking his transition into manhood. This name, less evocative of violence than his previous one, suggests a more mature individual, a warrior who had proven himself in battle and was now stepping into a leadership role. Later, he adopted the name Putinen, a Lakota word that translates to hair on the upper lip. This name likely referred to a prominent mustache, a symbol of manhood and warrior status among the Lakota people. It was a visual declaration of his identity, a proud display of his Lakota heritage. The transition to the name Dewey Beard happened gradually. On early ration rolls, his name appeared simply as Beard, perhaps a shortened version of Putinen or a simple clerical error. This simplified version stuck, and when he converted to Christianity and joined the Presbyterian Church, he kept Beard as his surname and chose Dewey as his given name. Despite adopting a new faith and a new name, he never fully abandoned his Lakota identity. He often introduced himself as Wasu Maza, meaning Iron Hail, a name that embodied the strength and resilience of his people. This name harked back to his warrior past, to the battles he had fought and the hardships he had endured. Dewey Beard lived a remarkably long life, witnessing incredible changes in the world around him. He died on November 2nd, 1955, a time when television was becoming a household fixture, with shows like Gunsmoke and The Honeymooners entertaining audiences across the nation. He even lived to see the early days of Johnny Carson's career in show business. Imagine, a man who had fought against Custer at the Little Bighorn, who had witnessed the height of the Wild West, lived to see a world of cars, airplanes, and television. His life spanned a period of dramatic transformation in American society, a testament to his adaptability and resilience. As a nephew of the legendary Crazy Horse, Dewey had joined Sitting Bull in seeking refuge in Canada after the Battle of the Little Bighorn. However, the pull of his homeland eventually led him back to the United States, where he settled on a reservation in South Dakota. He made efforts to assimilate into the new way of life, marrying, learning to farm, and even living in a traditional house. However, he never learned English, perhaps clinging to his Lakota language as a way to preserve his cultural identity in a rapidly changing world. Tragedy struck again in 1890 with the Wounded Knee Massacre, a brutal event that claimed the lives of hundreds of Lakota people. By this time, Crazy Horse and Sitting Bull, two iconic figures of Lakota resistance, were already dead. The buffalo, the lifeblood of the Lakota people, had been nearly wiped out, their herds decimated by overhunting. Despite these devastating losses, the Lakota people found solace and hope in the ghost dance religion. This spiritual movement promised a return to a time of abundance, with the buffalo herds restored, the dead resurrected, and the white settlers, or Wasichu, vanished from the land. It was a desperate plea for a return to a world where the Lakota could live in peace and harmony, a world free from the encroachment of white settlers and the destruction of their way of life. The ghost dance movement, with its promise of restoring the Lakota way of life, understandably unnerved the white settlers. They feared a return to violence, their minds conjuring images of war parties and attacks. Ignorance fueled their anxiety. They couldn't distinguish the peaceful ghost dance from the war dances of the past. Tension simmered across the plains, a powder keg waiting for a spark. Amidst this unease, Spotted Elk, a mini-Kanju chief also known as Bigfoot, led a band of 350 Lakota from the Cheyenne River Indian Reservation towards the Pine Ridge Agency, seeking a safe haven. Their journey spanned over 200 miles, a desperate trek across the frozen landscape. They were within a day's ride of their destination when the 7th Cavalry caught up with them. Colonel James Forsyth, leading the cavalry detachment, had orders to disarm the Lakota and escort them to Fort Omaha, Nebraska, where they would be imprisoned. Why? Because many in Spotted Elk's band had participated in the ghost dance, branding them as hostiles in the eyes of the Bureau of Indian Affairs. The government, gripped by fear, couldn't tolerate the perceived threat of armed hostiles roaming freely. Spotted Elk, a man of peace, sought to avoid bloodshed. He assured the colonel's scouts that he would surrender peacefully. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. At daybreak, the cavalry, some of whom were rumored to be drunk, descended upon the Lakota camp, demanding their weapons. The atmosphere crackled with tension, a volatile mix of fear and suspicion. When Black Coyote, a deaf Lakota man, hesitated in surrendering his rifle, a shot rang out. The fragile peace shattered. Hidden rifles emerged from beneath blankets, and the valley erupted in gunfire. The Lakota, cornered and desperate, fought back with fierce determination. It was a chaotic scene, a tragic clash fueled by mistrust and misunderstanding. Dewey Beard, now a seasoned warrior in his 30s, found himself thrust into the heart of the conflict. Unarmed when the shooting started, he reacted with instinctive courage. He lunged at a nearby soldier, plunging his knife into the man's chest and kidneys. Seizing the fallen soldier's rifle, Dewey ran towards the ravine where women and children had sought refuge, desperately searching for his family. As he ran, a bullet tore into his right arm. Soldiers emerged from both sides, their rifles spitting fire and death. Dewey came face to face with one of them, fired his newly acquired weapon, and watched the soldier crumple to the ground, his legs kicking wildly in the throes of death. Moments later, another bullet found its mark, striking Dewey just above his left knee. He staggered but remained standing, his determination fueled by adrenaline and fear. He reloaded his rifle and returned fire, his shots finding their targets amidst the chaos. His gun jammed. He discarded it, quickly replacing it with another rifle snatched from a fallen soldier, but his wounded leg hampered his movement. He collapsed onto his back, his vision blurred with pain. He saw a group of children running along a cut bank, caught in the crossfire, soldiers on both sides firing relentlessly. A Lakota warrior, his jaw mangled by a bullet, stumbled towards Dewey. He pressed a fresh cartridge belt into Dewey's hands, a lifeline in the midst of chaos. Then Dewey saw his stepmother. She was covered in blood, her face contorted in pain, clutching a pistol in one hand. "Go!" she urged him, her voice raspy. "Save yourself." Dewey watched in horror as she faltered, her strength failing. She collapsed onto the blood-soaked snow, her intestines spilling from a gaping wound in her abdomen. A wave of grief and rage washed over him, but he knew he had to survive. He had to find his wife and child. Choking back his tears, he raised his rifle and fired towards the soldiers, his injured right arm throbbing with pain. He pushed forward, keeping low to the ground to avoid the deadly hail of bullets from the Hotchkiss guns. He scrambled up a ravine, his eyes scanning the terrain for any sign of his family. He spotted a group of women and children huddled together, pinned down by enemy fire. With a surge of adrenaline, he took aim and fired, his bullet striking a soldier squarely in the chest. He gritted his teeth against the pain in his leg and fired again, wounding another soldier. A sound behind him caught his attention. He turned and fired, knocking another soldier from his saddle. Then he found himself in a brief but intense firefight with a fellow Indian, a scout fighting alongside the cavalry. The scene was a nightmare. The snow was stained crimson with blood. Dead and wounded lay scattered across the battlefield, their cries of pain and terror filling the air. It was a vision of hell on earth. When Dewey finally found his wife, she was already dead. His two brothers, his father, and his stepmother, all gone. Over 150 Lakota had been killed, many of them women and children. Modern estimates place the death toll even higher, between 250 and 300. His infant son was still alive, but barely. The baby had swallowed his mother's blood while trying to nurse in the ravine, and he was sick from that day forward. 3 months later, the child succumbed to his illness, leaving Dewey utterly bereft. Years later, in an interview with National Geographic, Dewey recounted the massacre with chilling simplicity. "They murdered us." But Dewey Beard was a survivor. He had stared death in the face at the Little Bighorn and Wounded Knee and emerged, battered but unbroken. He refused to let the tragedies he had witnessed define him. The following year, he married his deceased wife's sister, Chief Woman. Together, they settled on the Pine Ridge Reservation and started a new family, a testament to Dewey's resilience and his determination to find hope amidst the ashes of tragedy. Years passed, and Dewey Beard, the survivor of Little Bighorn and Wounded Knee, found himself drawn into a new arena, the world of show business. Buffalo Bill Cody, the legendary showman of the Wild West, recruited Dewey to join his renowned Wild West show. In 1895, Dewey embarked on a whirlwind tour that took him to far-flung corners of the United States, from Bangor, Maine to Montgomery, Alabama. He performed alongside cowboys, sharpshooters, and other Native American performers, showcasing his equestrian skills and sharing his stories with audiences eager for a glimpse of the Wild West. The tour was grueling, with 321 performances packed into 200 days across 19 states. For his efforts, Dewey received room and board, a modest salary of $25 a month, roughly $860 in today's money, and a suit of clothes gifted by Cody himself at the end of the tour. It remains unclear whether this was Dewey's only stint with the Wild West show. After his death, his wife described him as a showman, and a relative mentioned another show he participated in as an older man, but details of this remain elusive. What is certain is that Dewey's association with Buffalo Bill continued. In 1914, Cody produced a motion picture titled The Indian Wars, a biodocumentary that included a deeply insensitive reenactment of the Wounded Knee massacre, filmed at the actual site of the tragedy. Dewey, along with other survivors of the massacre, participated in this reenactment. While they were paid for their involvement, the experience undoubtedly reopened old wounds and brought back painful memories. Why did Dewey and the others agree to participate? Perhaps financial necessity played a role. Or maybe they saw it as an opportunity to share their side of the story, to try and set the record straight about the horrors of that day, however futile that attempt might have been. Back on the Pine Ridge Reservation, Dewey worked tirelessly to build a life for himself and his family. despite suffering from lingering war injuries that often made even walking a challenge. By the start of World War I, the Beard family had cultivated 3 acres of potatoes, owned 10 horses, 2 cows, and a wagon. A nearby spring provided fresh water, and they had even erected several miles of fencing around their property. They built a sod barn, raised a dozen chickens, and by 1925, Dewey's horse herd had grown to an impressive 300 head. He was a skilled horseman, renowned for his ability to leap onto a horse's back from a standstill, even in his later years and despite his injuries. He had a way with horses, a natural affinity that earned him a reputation as a horse whisperer. It was said that he could coax a stray horse back into the corral simply by talking to it. And in his younger days, he was known for his incredible speed, even outrunning horses in 100-yard dashes, a feat he often displayed during Cody's Wild West shows, captivating audiences with his athleticism. As Dewey grew older, he became an advocate for his people, traveling to Washington, D.C. with an interpreter to testify before Congress and lobby politicians for compensation for the survivors of Wounded Knee. In one such address in 1938, he eloquently stated, "The United States has done what we call one of the biggest murders." Dewey Beard's fight for justice continued. He spoke out against the government's historical injustices, demanding recognition and compensation for the Wounded Knee massacre. "They must be ashamed of it or something," he declared, "because they never offered to reimburse us or settle in any way." He also highlighted the irony of Lakota men volunteering to fight for a country that had so brutally mistreated their ancestors. Speaking of those who enlisted in World War I, he said, "They helped to defend our country, gave up their lives and fought for this government which, some 47 years ago, shot down their helpless unarmed grandfathers and grandmothers at Wounded Knee." This poignant observation underscored the complex relationship between the Lakota and the U.S. government, a relationship marked by both patriotism and deep-seated resentment. But the government wasn't done with Dewey Beard yet. As the United States prepared to enter World War II, the military sought vast tracts of land for aerial gunnery ranges and bombing practice. They needed sparsely populated areas with arid or semi-arid climates where the land was deemed less valuable for agriculture. Ironically, much of the land that fit this description was reservation land that the government had already forced Native American tribes onto, land considered undesirable and unsuitable for farming. Now they were taking even that away. The Lakota weren't the only ones affected. Other tribes also had their lands seized for military purposes, used for aerial target practice, POW camps, and landing strips. But Pine Ridge, where Dewey lived, was hit particularly hard. A staggering 340,000 acres were taken from the Lakota, with minimal compensation and a mere 10 days' notice to vacate their homes before the bombing began. Imagine the upheaval, the injustice. Dewey Beard, now in his 80s, faced the prospect of losing his home and livelihood yet again, this time to the insatiable demands of war. The government offered landowners a fair market value for their property, but this value was a cruel joke. It didn't reflect the depressed land prices of the Great Depression, nor did it account for the inevitable rise in agricultural prices due to the war. Improvements made to the land were undervalued, and moving expenses were denied. Dewey received a little over $3,000 for his property, a paltry sum paid out in installments. To add insult to injury, much of the stolen land wasn't even used for its intended purpose. Instead, the government leased it at a profit to local ranchers outside the reservation, further enriching those who had already benefited from the displacement of Native Americans. The injustice continued even after the war. If any Lakota wanted to use the land that had been rightfully theirs, they were forced to pay grazing fees to the government. The impact of this land grab was devastating and long-lasting. "They never did recover," lamented one Lakota man, speaking of the families forced from their homes. A 1951 study revealed the harsh reality. 80% of those displaced in 1942 had experienced a decline in their socioeconomic status, left with little or no land and less income than they had a decade earlier. Dewey Beard was among those who suffered. He and his wife moved in with their son Tom, hoping that his land might be returned. But that hope dwindled with time. Dewey became a nomad once again, just as he had been in his youth, moving from one family member's house to another, often living in tents or makeshift shelters. He never again owned his own home, a poignant symbol of the government's enduring betrayal. Despite the hardships they faced, the Lakota people maintained a remarkable sense of patriotism. Throughout the 20th century, they answered the call to serve their country in World War I, World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. This warrior society, whose ancestors had fiercely defended their land and way of life, continued to demonstrate their courage and loyalty on battlefields around the world. In 1943, amidst the turmoil of World War II, 1,500 Oglala Lakota from Pine Ridge, out of a population of just 10,000, enlisted in the military. Even Dewey Beard, in his 80s and facing immense personal challenges, contributed to the war effort, scraping together what little money he had to buy war bonds. When a young relative sought his advice before heading off to fight in Korea, Dewey offered these words of wisdom. Be brave. Don't be scared. Don't even be scared a little. Those that are scared and run are the first ones to get shot. Always try to be up front and pray a lot. Pray when you get up and pray all during the day. To survive, Dewey had to rely on the very people who had wronged him. He supplemented his meager income by posing for photographs with tourists and curious children who gawked at him as if he were a relic of a bygone era, the last survivor of the Little Bighorn. He even took on small roles in movies like Tomahawk, The Battles of Chief Pontiac, and The Last Hunt. The pay was minimal, but it helped him stave off starvation and afford the one-room tar paper shack he called home in his final years. The exact date of Dewey Beard's birth remains uncertain, adding another layer of mystery to his long and eventful life. One of his direct descendants claimed he was born in 1856, which would have made him 99 years old at the time of his death. Dewey Beard's life was shrouded in a bit of mystery, even down to his birth date. Census records suggest he was born in 1862. But Dewey himself gave conflicting accounts. In 1907, he told a reporter he was 43, placing his birth year in 1864. Years later, in a 1955 speech to Congress, he claimed to be 97, which would mean he was born in 1858. Whatever the exact year, it's undeniable that Dewey lived a long and extraordinary life, likely reaching his 90s. Born into a proud and free Lakota nation, Dewey's early years were spent mastering the skills of a warrior, riding, hunting, and fighting. He witnessed firsthand the dramatic transformation of the American West, the decline of his people's way of life, and the encroachment of white settlers. He survived the horrors of the Little Bighorn and Wounded Knee, saw his people confined to reservations, and endured the government's repeated betrayals. Yet through it all, he persevered, his spirit unbroken. Dewey Beard, the Lakota warrior who fought at Little Bighorn and Wounded Knee, who witnessed the decline of his people and the relentless encroachment of white settlers, who advocated tirelessly for justice and recognition, was laid to rest in an unmarked grave. No bugle-played taps, no rifle volleys honored his passing, no parades celebrated his life. It wasn't until 2012, decades after his death, that a simple marker was finally placed at his resting place in St. Stephen's Catholic Cemetery at Pine Ridge. This stark lack of recognition stands in stark contrast to the honors bestowed upon another survivor of the Little Bighorn, a survivor who, by his own admission, had spilled his fair share of Army blood. But this survivor wasn't a man, it was a horse. Yes, a horse, a bay gelding to be exact. His name was Comanche, the personal mount of Captain Miles Keogh, and he became a living legend as the sole survivor among the cavalry's horses at Little Bighorn. Despite his wounds and scars, he was pampered and paraded, transformed into a cherished symbol of the cavalry's bravery and resilience. The grieving soldiers, perhaps seeking solace in their devastating loss, lavished him with extraordinary care. He was nursed back to health, given a place of honor within the 7th Cavalry, and celebrated as a testament to their courage. The bitter irony cuts deep. A horse, a mere animal, received more recognition and respect than a Lakota warrior who had witnessed and endured unimaginable hardship. While Comanche's preserved remains still stand proudly displayed at the University of Kansas Natural History Museum, Dewey Beard spent his final years in a tar paper shack, posing for tourist photos to survive. This stark disparity forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about justice, dignity, and the value America placed on Native American lives. Had Dewey been a cavalry veteran living on land the military wanted, would they have dared to evict him with just 10 days' notice? Would they have left a 90-year-old Indian Wars veteran destitute without public outcry? The treatment of these two survivors, one equine, one human, stands as a damning testament to the deep-seated biases that plagued our nation's history and continue to echo through generations of Native American communities. Today, as we send billions in foreign aid to countries like Ukraine and spend trillions on the war on terror, we must confront an uncomfortable truth. Native American communities continue to face systemic inequities at home. The funds poured into foreign conflicts could transform lives in communities that have waited generations for justice, bringing better education, healthcare, and infrastructure to reservations across America. The question remains, when will meaningful change reach those who have waited longest? Native Americans have proven their loyalty repeatedly, from the world wars to modern conflicts. Yet their sacrifices often go unrecognized, their struggles unaddressed. It's not just about acknowledging past injustices. It's about taking concrete steps toward a better future. Dewey Beard's final words capture this enduring spirit. "O Galala people, tell about me in a good way. I am a warrior." His death song, punctuated by two proud yips, echoes through time as a reminder of Native American resilience. While his grave remained unmarked for decades, Comanche the horse stands preserved in a museum, a stark reminder of how America chooses to remember its history. Yet there is hope in remembering. Every story shared, every truth acknowledged, brings us closer to understanding and change. Dewey's experiences mirror countless others, lives marked by displacement, poverty, and discrimination. But they also showcase extraordinary strength and endurance. As we end this story, remember that Dewey Beard wasn't just a survivor of Little Bighorn or Wounded Knee. He was a symbol of resilience, a warrior who never stopped fighting for justice, even when his nation failed to recognize his worth. If this story moved you, help us keep these vital histories alive. Subscribe to Native Legends and History for more untold stories of America's first peoples.